Hello again, everybody. I'm Roger Hoover. Glad to welcome you back to the Crimson Tide Sports Network, and welcome to this Tuesday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. We're taking a look back at the Mississippi State game. We're also starting to turn our attention towards the fourth Saturday in October this year, typically the third Saturday in October, the rivalry matchup with Tennessee. But glad to have you with us on the network today, and as we go through the headlines, we'll be using our RJ Young Smartboard to go through all of the different news items that we have for you today. And don't forget, RJ Young is the official technology solutions provider of Crimson Drive. First of all, on the show today, I mentioned the last game against Mississippi State. A lot of good moments for the Crimson Tide in the 49-9 victory over the Bulldogs. So we will take you inside the broadcast booth with our booth cam highlights, as you can see Eli Gold calling a lot of touchdowns, a lot of great moments for Alabama on Saturday. And then we'll start turning our attention to what's coming up for this week. As Tennessee is the opponent, we'll have Coach's checklist from Coach Saban's Monday press conference, give you the 3 key things you need to know about from yesterday's press conference. Then we'll have the big picture, as we always take a national view of Alabama football, and be talking with David Ubben, who covers college football for The Athletic, a great writer, also hosts a lot of podcasts, so I think you'll enjoy that conversation with David Ubben. Last but not least, it's time for our Alabama Legends interview, and this week we'll be honoring the 1971 SEC Championship team that was led by Robin Parkhouse, a great defensive end for the Crimson Tide, along with running back Johnny Musso. They'll be our honorary captains on Saturday at Bryant-Denny Stadium, and Robin Parkhouse was nice enough to take some time and really talk about his Alabama playing career, so we'll have that conversation coming up for you as well. Speaking of the Crimson Tide football team, some football-specific headlines, starting with the 49-9 win over Mississippi State. Just a great performance on Saturday, bouncing back following the loss against Texas A&M. Will Anderson Jr. keeps making plays. We talked all before about his leadership of this football team. He's doing it both vocally, physically, with what he did, getting 4 sacks. Tremendous performance against Mississippi State. Also, Bryce Young, the quarterback for the Crimson Tide, continues playing at a high level. Continues to be a lot of Heisman conversation about Bryce Young. We'll talk about that with David Ubben in just a moment. But Davey O'Brien, grade 8 Manning Award watch list. He was named to that earlier this week. And now it's time for Alabama against Tennessee. And of course, the Crimson Tide in the Saban era have won all 14 previous meetings with the Volunteers. And that's coming up on Saturday, 6 p.m. Our coverage on the radio will start at 3 o'clock. Across the network. Men's basketball, we're getting closer to the start of basketball season, and we've gotten some good news for the Crimson Tide men's team, as Alabama is ranked number 14 in the AP preseason poll, and it also came out earlier today. Alabama picked second in the SEC preseason poll, just behind Kentucky. So great honors there. Great honors for Javon Quinterly, named to the Bob Cousy Award watch list for the nation's best point guard. And also with the SEC honors, he and Jaden Shackelford both preseason All-SEC. So you love seeing that. Friday, you want to make sure you're at Foster Auditorium for Tide tip-off with the men's and women's basketball teams. So that comes your way at 7:30. The doors will open at 6:30, and then the seating, first come, first serve. So make sure you are there early for the Tide tip-off, a great kickoff event for Crimson Tide basketball. And then Sunday, it'll be Alabama at home against Louisiana at 2 o'clock. That is a charity exhibition game at Coleman Coliseum. We will not have a broadcast for it. There will not be one on SEC Network either, so make sure you are in person in Tuscaloosa at Coleman Coliseum for that charity exhibition game against the Ragin' Cajuns. Get your first look at Nate Oates and the men's basketball team this season. Some other Alabama athletics news, starting with the soccer team, really fought well against Texas A&M on Friday in College Station. A 1-1 draw in that match against a team that was picked to win the SEC, or at least tied to win the SEC along with Arkansas. But Alabama played great in that match, and now this Thursday they'll be at home against the Kentucky Wildcats in the next to last home game of the season for Alabama soccer. Volleyball team continues to play a tough schedule, and coming up they will have the Florida Gators at 7 p.m. Mary Wise in Florida. Always one of the premier volleyball programs in the nation. They're coming to Tuscaloosa. 7 o'clock at Foster Auditorium coming up on Wednesday. And then the softball team, fall ball has been really a lot of fun at Rhodes Stadium. This past Sunday, defeated Memphis, defeated West Alabama, and coming up next Sunday, I mentioned the men's basketball exhibition, but also softball will be having a doubleheader against Wallace State at 1:30 at the Rhodes House. So great opportunity to see Alabama softball in action with some fun fall ball. We are certainly liking that. Baseball continues to have scrimmages as well at Sewell Thomas Stadium. So even though those are spring sports, they're playing a lot in the fall, and great weather we've had here in Tuscaloosa, great opportunities to see Alabama baseball and softball.
Well, I was really pleased and proud of the way our guys responded. In this last game, I thought we played really hard in the game. Played for 60 minutes, tried to finish plays, played the next play regardless of what happened in the game. When we had bad plays, it wasn't always perfect execution, but I think we competed in the game like I'd like to see us compete. The question is can this become a part of who we are, or does something bad have to happen for us to respond in the way we need to respond? And I think that's a challenge for all of us, and that's a challenge for all of our players and the leadership on our team to continue to do the things we need to do. Guys that practiced well, played well in the game, guys that prepared well, played well in the game. So that's something that we need to continue to do. I think the rivalry between Tennessee and Alabama is one of the old great rivalries in college football. It goes way back. I know it means a lot to a lot of people in our state. Certainly means a lot to me, and hopefully we'll get that translated to our team. Josh Heupel has done a really good job at Tennessee. Their team is playing really well. They're explosive on offense. They make a lot of big plays. They run the ball very effectively. I don't really think the quarterback situation, regardless of whatever it is, both guys are very capable. They're very similar in style in terms of the way they play. They're big guys, strong arms, accurate passers, and they have the ability to make plays with their feet and run quarterback runs. They have good skilled players outside. Their defense is playing, really well. They're mostly a four-down team, but they do a good job. They've played really well together as a unit, create a lot of negative plays, and they've got good specialists on special teams, and they played extremely well on teams as well. So all the way around, it's going to be a very challenging game for us. Well, he's worked really, really hard, and he's making good progress, and it was good to see him get in the game a little bit this last game and make a couple positive runs, and I think that getting his confidence back is a big part of that. And we're going to continue to work him, and has a great attitude about what he's trying to do, so I'm sure he's going to just get better and better.
That was Coach Saban meeting with the media on Monday as Alabama, again, really solid win against Mississippi State. 49-9 was the final score in Starkville, and now starting to set their focus on the Tennessee Volunteers coming up this Saturday. With that in mind, we always like to have the big picture, which is a national view of Alabama football, and today we're joined by somebody that has a little familiarity with Tennessee, David Ubben. He was a beat reporter for The Athletic, covering Tennessee on a daily basis before this year, transitioning as into one of the national college football reporting roles for The Athletic. So someone with a great deal of perspective on Alabama football, Tennessee football, and the SEC and college football in general. Let's welcome in David Ubben of The Athletic as he's this week's guest on The Big Picture. David, first of all, it's great to see you, and I loved your SEC takeaways column this past week in The Athletic, and you just simply had the title, Alabama is Fine. Was that your major takeaway from Saturday in Starkville?
Yeah, I think, this early in the season still, you're never quite sure when teams are lying to you. I mean, I think when Florida challenged Alabama, it was easy to sort of think, well, is Florida going to really, push and do they look like an 11-1 team? That has not been the case. But so after Texas A&M beats Alabama, you're kind of wondering, because A&M had been so underwhelming for the first, 5 weeks of the season. But, you're waiting to see them sort of flex, and that's what we got against Alabama. I think, obviously, they were well-suited to slow down the air raid, did exactly that, no touchdowns. And when you don't give up a touchdown in your Alabama, you're probably going to win just about every time.
What have you thought so far of the play of the Crimson Tide offense, especially the quarterback Bryce Young?
I think the biggest thing is just how versatile they are. I mean, when they want to air it out, they can. When they want to take it to the ground like they did against Ole Miss, they absolutely can. The offensive line is really, really good. And I think that, can set up a lot of things. If you look at some of the advanced numbers on Bryce Young, he's got a lot of time back there. And he's got most of the time, when that happens, good plays are going to happen downfield. So I think for me, the biggest takeaway from Alabama's offense is just the versatility, and that they can win a game in a number of ways. Downfield, across the middle. If they need to dink and dunk, they can. If teams just want to open up the umbrella, and if teams are going to put 4 guys in the box, 5 guys in the box, they're more than willing to mash you. So when you can do that, we can win a lot of different games in a lot of different ways. That's a team that's capable of doing a whole lot and making a whole lot of noise, come time.
Yeah, the Crimson Tide have played 7 games. Of course, they've won 6 of them, but a lot of people are still talking about the one loss in College Station to Texas A&M. Kind of watching that one from afar, what were your main takeaways of that night?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is I haven't seen Alabama's offensive line confused like that really maybe ever. It's been a long time. They fixed some of that issues and some of those issues in the second half, but Texas A&M was able to build up enough of a buffer that it was tough for them to come back. And I think we haven't seen, once Alabama took that touchdown lead in the fourth quarter, it kind of felt like, well, they're going to crush A&M at this point, and that didn't happen. So I think, concerning that the defense that's been really good for most of the season couldn't get a stop when they really needed one. And then offensively, you get the ball back late in the game, a tie ball game, and it looks like, well, they're in really good position to make a game-winning drive here. You don't get it. I think they went 3 and out on that drive. So really kind of a failure all around there. A lot of chances to win that game, a game that Alabama probably should have won, and they didn't. And it was shocking to see because obviously – as the 100-game winning streak against unranked teams would suggest, when Alabama's supposed to win a game or in position to win a game, they do that. So, it certainly set off a lot of alarm bells. We'll see if we see more things like that later in the season. But ultimately, if you've got as much talent as Alabama does, you got a pretty big margin for error. So we'll see over the last month and a half or so of the season.
Another team with a ton of talent is the Georgia Bulldogs in the other division in the SEC East. Does it seem like we're on a collision course for a huge, massive game coming up in December between Alabama and Georgia?
Absolutely. I mean, Alabama to get out of the SEC West. I mean, there's still some opportunity there for somebody else to sneak in. But ultimately, walking away with the SEC East. And it looks to me, I think Alabama obviously the best team in the West. They just got to prove it. But I want to see that game. And I think, too, Georgia, where, it looks like this is the year for them. They've certainly got the best team in the country right now. It would feel wrong if they didn't have to go through Alabama at some point. Maybe that's twice. Maybe that's and then in the playoff. If Alabama goes to the SEC championship and beats Georgia, Alabama's going to the playoff. So I'd like to see that. I mean, I want to see it at least once. I probably wouldn't mind seeing it twice, honestly. I think that game, it's just very different when teams like Ohio State and Georgia and Alabama get on the field with each other. It looks like a different sport because of all the talent that's all over the place. So, it would feel wrong if Georgia didn't have to beat Alabama to go to the playoff. And I want to see that ball game just because it's great for college football. I mean, those are the games that people really look forward to. And as a college football fan myself, I want to see it.
Absolutely. And you always love seeing great players play well. And so far this season, Jordan Davis has done that. Speaking of the Georgia Bulldogs, why have you felt like it was time to kind of talk about his Heisman opportunities as you look at an outstanding defensive player like him?
Because I think he's really the piece that makes Georgia's defense really go. He can open up so much for them. You can't run on them because he's plugging things up and pushing the line of scrimmage back right in the middle and plugging up everything. Defensively, him as well as the rest of their defensive line, when you can rush 3-4 guys, Kirby Smart's, you can do some things coverage-wise on the back end that really are difference makers. And so Georgia, they've got this defense that's probably, one of the best we've seen in 10 years or so, probably since around that 11 Alabama team. Seen the best defense we've seen in a long time. And the biggest reason why, granted, there's a lot of talent, but the biggest reason why, literally and figuratively, is Jordan Davis. And so, not to mention just a physical freak, 6'7", 6'6", 340, just an unbelievable player and really fun to watch. Well, fans haven't watched him before. Take 10 plays when Georgia's on defense. 10 plays on Georgia defense. That might be 3 possessions the way they're playing. But go keep an eye on him, and he's something to watch.
And kind of along those lines as well, I mean, you mentioned the Heisman. A lot of people are with Alabama pointing to Bryce Young, but maybe there should be some discussion as well about Will Anderson Jr. because he's been, like Jordan Davis, unstoppable for other teams.
Yeah, I mean, 4 sacks on Saturday, I think, against Mississippi State. So he's played really, really well. But I think ultimately it comes down to, Alabama wins. They're a little bit, a team that's, you've got that star quarterback, obviously, in Bryce Young. When it comes to Heisman voting, it's a fickle process. There's like 800 voters. It's not the greatest process in the world. There's a lot of folks that don't pay as close of attention, and it's tough for defensive players to get a lot of shine. Even when, in a year where, there isn't that sort of super duper mega star who's putting up 500 yards and 4 touchdowns every single week. This is a year where a defensive guy could shine. But I think for me, the reason why Georgia is winning games, especially why they're still undefeated when you look at that Clemson game at the start of the season, is because of that defense. Alabama looks a little more balanced. They've obviously got a really good defense, but the offense is doing some really good things as well. So I think ultimately, for me, Georgia's defense is why they're great. And the linchpin of that pushes Davis as the guy for me. But Bryce Young is right there. Matt Corral is right there. I mean, this race is still really, really wide open. I think certainly if you're looking at betting favorites, it's Corral and Young right now, kind of neck and neck, and we'll see how that plays out in the last month and a half of the season.
And sticking with Alabama's defense for a moment, you cover college football for The Athletic, but you've also covered Tennessee heavily in the past few years. So just what have you made of the transition from Henry To'oTo'o from Tennessee to Alabama? You got to know him a little bit when you were in Knoxville.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately he's still got a lot of improving to make, but he's a playmaker. His football IQ is off the charts. When you look at, especially in the run game, his read and react, his ability to see what's coming. And part of that is just because of work habits. And he's does pretty much everything you'd want from a player in terms of preparation, understanding what offenses are doing, and then having the physical ability to take advantage of that knowledge that's in his head, taking that from his head to the field. He's just a stellar player. Obviously, in coverage, some improvement there, but he's still pretty young. But when you have that work ethic, when you have that physical ability, and when you have, just in general, the acumen that he has, some of the intangibles that he has, there's a lot of reason to believe he's going to be able to make that. But when your football IQ is as high as it is, he can do a great job of sort of quarterbacking the defense, getting everybody in position. He did a lot of that at Tennessee. So a guy that has a chance to be a really special player by the end of his career.
Tennessee is the opponent for Alabama coming in this week. And what can you tell us about Josh Heupel's team on the field? And we know there's a lot of talk about the Volunteers for some off the field things at the moment, but what are they bringing to Tuscaloosa on the field?
Yeah, well, off the field things that came onto the field.
Right.
So,
that's true.
But no, I think, the biggest thing I've taken away from Tennessee this year is, coming into the year, it felt like, well, they're probably going to score some points, but the defense, in part because of Henry To'oTo'o's exit, but Quavaris Crouch as well, Kevon Bennett, DeAndre Johnson, they lost a ton of pieces in that front seven. Bryce Thompson also left for the NFL, one of their best corners. People thought, well, they're going to give up a ton of points. And on paper, that looked to be the case. But their defensive metrics are up across the board. They faced 101 plays against Ole Miss, gave up 31 points. That's pretty impressive. And so this defense has been better than anyone could have possibly predicted. And I think that is keeping them in some games. They haven't really gotten smacked around. They didn't play well in the second half against Florida, but they've hung around, and this will be a big test for them. And I wouldn't be surprised if they could push Alabama a little bit. I mean, I think Alabama just too deep, too talented. But this doesn't have quite the same walkover feel that it did in some of Jeremy Pruitt's teams, where you're like, there's no universe in which Tennessee can be competitive or win this game, just by the way that they play and all those things.
And how much does this offense change from Hendon Hooker, who put up some great numbers against Missouri and South Carolina, versus Joe Milton, who started the year as Tennessee's starter, kind of with what happens with that quarterback position on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of difference in what the offense does. I just think ultimately Hooker, if he's healthy and able to play, which I'm not so sure he's going to be able to, he's just a little bit more accurate, and he's played a lot more football than anyone else on this roster, and you can kind of see that. The poise is there. Both those guys can make plays with their feet, but I think with Milton, it just comes down to he's been operating this offense much more efficiently. When guys are open, he's hitting them. We didn't see that with Joe Milton. Had guys running open against Pitt earlier in the season, and he was overthrowing them just about every time. And then of course, the final play against Ole Miss, to put it up in the end zone and you just sort of drift out of bounds. That's going to cost you some capital with the coaching staff, with your players, with the fans as well a little bit. So, Milton, the talent is off the charts. The measurables are off the charts, but the production has to be there. We haven't quite seen that yet. So, Hooker, he doesn't wow you quite as much. The ball doesn't jump out of his hand in the same way that it does to Milton, but the production is there, and he's settled into becoming the guy. So a poorly timed injury for him. It looked really bad on Saturday night, but it looks like it might not be something that keeps him out for a long time. But I'd be kind of surprised if we see him play against Alabama.
Visiting with David Ubben of The Athletic. Of course, we love the coverage that Aaron Suttles provides kind of on a daily basis of Crimson Tide football for The Athletic. But what else can you tell us about what you guys are providing in terms of covering college football? Really, if you love the coaching carousel, no better place to go than what we've seen in The Athletic the last couple of weeks and what's going to
Yeah.
be a crazy college football offseason.
Yeah, we had a Secrets of the Coaching Carousel series of stories last week, and looked at, for what are the toughest jobs in college football. Alabama actually got some votes. I can't say that I would necessarily agree. I think a lot of people would say that people are overrating the Alabama job based on who's in it, who makes it look very, very easy when it is absolutely not. So that's somewhat of a case, but it's around the expectation. I don't envy the guy who follows up Nick Saban, but just looking inside the coaching carousel, my colleague Brody Miller had a fantastic piece looking at what happens and how you go from winning a national championship to getting fired in 21 months. And it makes a lot more sense if you haven't paid attention reading Brody's piece and some of the off the field stuff and why the on the field product looked the way that it did. That was really a fantastic piece from him. So our college football team, I think we can hang with anybody. I mean, we are really big, and we've got really talented people. Obviously, Bruce Feldman, Stu Mandel, Andy Staples, Nickel Auerbach, Matt Fortuna. We got a lot of folks that do a lot of really quality work. So come check us out. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and whatever you care about in sports, we've probably got you covered. Whether it's Premier League, we've got a ton of people over in the UK, fantasy football. MMA, auto racing, all that stuff. And then, of course, whatever pro sports you got, we got a good college basketball team. And then, of course, our college football team. So if you care about it, we're probably writing about it on a pretty frequent basis.
You guys do a great job. And David, you're at the top of the list at The Athletic. Just thank you for joining us here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network, and wish you all the best moving forward. We'll see you.
Thank you.
That was David Ubben of The Athletic. A lot of great coverage of college football can be found on theathletic.com. You do have to have a subscription, but again, a lot of great coverage, including Aaron Suttles, who we've had on last week here on Crimson Drive, covering Alabama on a daily basis. But David does a great job kind of giving you a national perspective on the latest college football news with what's going on in 2021. But if we go back in time, back to 1971, it was the Crimson Tide really bouncing back after a couple of tough years midway through Coach Bryant's tenure as head coach of the Crimson Tide, and it took a really special team to deliver a championship back to Alabama, the 1971 SEC champion Crimson Tide. And this weekend, we'll be honoring that team as a lot of those players and their families will be coming back to campus, and especially we'll be honoring two players, running back Johnny Musso, as well as defensive end Robin Parkhouse. And Robin had some time to catch up with us earlier this week and share some memories of the 1971, plus what coming back to Tuscaloosa coming up this weekend against Tennessee will mean to him and his family. I think you'll really enjoy hearing these insights from one of the best that's played for the Crimson Tide, Robin Parkhouse. Robin, roll Tide. It's great to see you.
Roll Tide, Roger. Thank you for having me. Real excited about coming up this weekend. So thank you.
When I mentioned the 1971 SEC champion Crimson Tide, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Well, the first thing I think that comes to my mind, Roger, is just the great coaches, starting with Coach Bryant and several other very, very good, successful coaches that went on after Coach Bryant that were part of that staff. And then my group that we're going to have the 50-year reunion with that came in 68, freshmen. And those next two varsity years, sophomore and junior year for us, we had those 6-5 seasons, and then 6-5-1 my junior year. And then so there was some talk at that time of, was Coach Bryant going to stay around for any more of that, or how much more of that losing could he take, And so when we were seniors, our group, several of us had played quite a bit as sophomores and juniors, and we had some good younger guys on that team too, great teammates. And so we were able to turn it around and go 11-1 in the regular season and beat Auburn for the SEC championship. I believe we were both 10-0 going into that game. And so it was kind of like a playoff that just happened out that way then. But and so then we got to play for the championship. against Nebraska in the Orange Bowl. And if you don't mind, Roger, we won't talk anymore about that game right now. They were a very good team, and we just didn't ever really get to get in that game too good.
Understand, but you guys did bring a championship back, the SEC championship in 1971, and you guys are being honored this weekend with Tennessee in town. That was also a big game in 1971 as well to end what had been a small losing streak to Tennessee.
Yes, it was. And all of those games were very, very big to us. And in terms of those first 2 years, we had been beat by by several of those teams in the SEC that Coach Bryant had been pretty consistently beating them in the series. And yeah, we were able to win and get those victories our senior year, like I said, and then that was just, I know our group takes a lot of pride in the fact that Coach Bryant, that set him back on the track to stay through the 70s and win 3 more national championships. And at that time, I believe, was the winningest coach number of games, and just got to kind of solidify his greatness, and so we feel like we were instrumental in that, in the sense that turning it around that year and getting the Tide back on the winning track. So we take a lot of pride in that, and we all feel very fortunate and very blessed to have been part of it. I know I do, and I think I'm speaking for all the guys that were there with us at that time.
Of course, this weekend you're being honored along with Johnny Musso as our honorary captains. For our Alabama fans that maybe didn't get to watch him game in, game out like you did, just what made him so special as a running back?
Well, Johnny he didn't have any give in him, and there was just no quit or giving up on any play or any run. And it was probably just, I mean, he had the gift of strength and speed, quickness. He didn't have a tremendous amount of speed, but he had plenty of quickness, and was just such an intense running back in the way he got after it, and also blocked. He was a great blocker when one of the other tailbacks or running backs were getting the ball in the wishbone going the other way. And but Johnny just he just led by example, and the effort and intensity that he played with. It was just really, on any run that you watch Johnny run, it was it was inspiring, just the effort that he would put out. And he was just a great player, and he's an even better man.
You mentioned hard to take down. Were you able to get him a few times onto the turf when you guys are practicing against each other, getting ready for seasons and things like that?
Yeah, I had to go up against him some, and got lucky. Probably got him down a few times, and he probably ran right through me a few times too. But yeah, Johnny was. I think one time, I hit him, and his thigh was coming up like he did with those piston thighs, and hit me in the head, about knocked me out. So yeah. Johnny was tough to bring down. I tell you, you almost had to gang tackle him. Very few one-on-one tackles took Johnny down.
And we're visiting with Robin Parkhouse, who played for Coach Bryant. And I always ask players that were in the Bryant era, just what are the biggest life lessons you took from Coach Bryant that you still think about to this day?
Well, I tell you what, that's a good question, Roger. And really, I'm not exaggerating here, but really, the truth is that the good fortune of playing for Coach Bryant, and that really there's not really, I don't think, a day hardly that goes by that some decision or some challenge or something that I have to deal with in the course of a day that I'm not affected and don't remember some of the lessons that I learned from Coach Bryant. And one of them was, and last time I talked to Mal Moore on the telephone, we both agreed that this was, one of his absolute best. And that was, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And that's helped me through a lot of situations that I put myself into, and some trouble and so forth in the past. But those lessons that I learned from, and that you never give up. You just keep on keeping on. And Coach Bryant, tremendous amount of class, and he told us that he was going to teach us how to win with class and how to lose with class. And that's a big part of it, because nobody wins every game or every battle. You might, fortunately, like, have a coach like Coach Saban and you go undefeated and win them all, but that's few and far between. So just those lessons that he used football kind of as his platform to really take a bunch of young men that age and teach us those kind of life lessons that are just really invaluable to me. And I know I'm speaking for probably all of us that were there during that time, and that had the privilege of playing for Coach Bryant.
It was special for you to play for Coach Bryant, as well as all the other coaches that were on Coach Bryant's staff, like you mentioned, Brother Oliver, Pat Dye. But what about Ken Donahue? I mean, he holds a special place with both Alabama and Tennessee history, but he was quite a character, a very special man as well.
Oh, there's no question about it. He was a little bit like Coach Bryant's drill sergeant. There was no give, and he was so intense and so committed. I can see him coming back from those games sometimes when we'd win a game, and we'd be on the plane flying back, and everybody, if we won, we're kind of a little bit jovial, having a little bit of enjoying the victory on the flight home, or on the bus, even and there'd be Coach Donahue. He'd have out next team stuff and would be studying. He just had a level of dedication and toughness that and you always, the thing, Coach Donahue, we all knew where we stood with him. There was never any easing up or favoritism, or somebody gets a little better, this or that, than anybody else. The ground was level with Coach Donahue for everybody. He was tough on all of us, but as fair as the day is long. And he was just a great coach.
Part of a great team back in 1971, the team we're honoring coming up this Saturday at Bryant-Denny Stadium. And Robin, before we let you go, just what have you been up to the last few years? I'm sure you got to love watching Alabama football still, the championship last year for Coach Saban, and all the success Alabama continues to have.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, we have enjoyed watching Alabama play, and Coach Saban and the job that he's done. There's no doubt about it. And it's just, again, I know all of us feel really incredibly blessed and fortunate that that Coach Bryant was the coach and had the success that he did, and we were able to be a part of that winning Alabama football tradition. And then now what Coach Saban has been able to do to build on that and go on. It's just a really powerful thing, and just in the sense that we are so fortunate to be part of that in the small way that we were 50 years ago. And now that Coach Saban has accomplished what he has, and we've been able to maybe be part of that he's gone on with it. And he and Coach Brian have some things in common, I really think, in terms of preparation. And another one of Coach Bryant's favorite sayings that I always had is that it's not the will to win that matters. Everybody has that. It's the will to prepare to win that matters. And that's Coach Saban, is preparation and getting the team ready to play, regardless of the team you're playing or the magnitude of the game. He gets them ready. And he's been doing it with just, no one can even begin to question Coach Saban's success. his process, it works, doesn't it, Roger?
It sure does. 6 national championships, same as Coach Bryant here at Alabama, 7 overall for Coach. It's been remarkable. Before we let you go, again, what have you been up to in the last few years? And how I'm sure you're excited that a lot of friends and family are going to be here this weekend.
Yeah, yep, they are. And we are excited about that. We're coming up with one of our grandsons, and we have twin 15-year-old grandsons, and coming up with our daughter-in-law, Leslie White. And our granddaughter is there at the university. And so we're going to be seeing and spending some time with her. And so we're very excited about that. And I'm a residential building contractor and worked for a company for about the last 10 years that we primarily do ongoing maintenance and remodels. And so yeah, I've been doing that and involved with the FCA and our and so yeah, life is good right now, real good. Actually, our grandsons and our granddaughter go to Boone High. Went our granddaughter, but they all went to Boone High School. The two boys are over there now, which was my old high school, and I live right here in this. We do in the same neighborhood, just about a mile from the school, and so. Getting to watch Harrison play some football and Hamilton, our other grandson, he loves the singing and the dancing and acting. And so just a lot of fun being a part of all that. And then Helen Grace was a cheerleader over at Boone during her 4 years there. And so, yeah, we're excited about, being with the family this weekend for sure.
We're excited to have you back in Tuscaloosa, Robin. Just thank you so much for joining us here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network, sharing some great memories of your playing days, and hope you guys have a blast getting recognized the 1971 SEC champions. Roll Tide. Thank you.
Roll Tide, roll, Roger. And I'm very humbled by it and very excited to be up there with them. Looking forward to it.
Such great memories from Robin Parkhouse. So we mentioned Johnny Musso, legendary Crimson Tide running back, during that conversation. Hopefully we will be able to talk with him on Thursday's edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota, as again we celebrate the 1971 SEC champion Alabama Crimson Tide, one of the most special teams in Alabama football history. It's going to wrap up this Tuesday edition. I get my days mixed up sometimes. It's Tuesday, and this edition of Crimson Drive, of course, has been driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. Make sure you check out TuscaloosaToyota.com. Big thank you to the guests we had, Robin Parkhouse, as well as David Ubben, as well as Coach's Checklist, as well on this Tuesday edition. And don't forget, we'll be back coming up on Thursday at 2 o'clock as we continue breaking down Alabama and Tennessee. We'll have a Hey Coach preview with Eli Gold. We'll have a other booth with Bob Kessling of Tennessee. Also, hopefully a conversation with Johnny Musso as well, plus a Writers Row interview. So a lot coming up Thursday, 2 o'clock, right back here on the CTSN Facebook page. Thanks to our producer, Ethan Carabin, for putting this together, and thanks to all of you for watching the Crimson Tide Sports Network. This has been Roger Hoover saying so long and roll Tide from the capstone.